Carlos is a Colombian psychologist with a master's in contemporary urbanism from the London School of Economics. BJ is here. Let me just admit her. He's been focusing on urban development, mobility, urban new mobility and digital technologies, road safety, public health, and climate change projects in the cities of LMIs and developing world. He has supervised, implemented, and participated in over 100 technical consultancies in more than 30 cities in Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the United States, and have coordinated and delivered more than 70 training sessions on these topics. He has also authored various books, chapters, journal articles, and blog posts on key topics of road safety, mobility, and urban development. You might not know this, but he's also a proud recipient of the Cycling Embassy of Denmark Leadership Award. And I will begin to just post a few things about his bona fides, just to embarrass him. So just bear with me. And you might also heard or know of Carlos as being the founder, one of the founding members of this Despacio. So I'll also post that as well. He was also a distinguished TUMI friend in 2019, and after working in several NGOs, UN agencies, and development banks, he coordinated GIZ's Sabin Urban Transport Policy, I think it's called. Sorry, it's the name slips me a little bit. Sustainable Urban Transport Project. So that's what he's been working on. And as of late, he's been supporting NUMO, which is the New Urban Mobility Alliance. So I am pleased and honored that that Carlos has been able to lend his expertise and work with GRSB this year, taking over from the big shoes that was Miss Marinette Otero. And so welcome on board once again, Carlos, and I give you the floor. And while I do that, I shall embarrass you some more with some of the links to those particular institutions that you have founded or worked with in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I mean, some of you have met me before. It's great to meet others that I haven't met yet. Looking forward to visiting your countries and cities if I haven't done so already. Okay, so I'm going to talk about games, which is this one thing that may help us a lot in some of our work, especially in this program. I think that there's a lot that could be done. And it comes from one of the things that people were saying when we asked you about how to improve the community of practice. And then we saw that one of the things was how can we talk to youth, integrate them better, have them engage. And I think gaming could be one of those things. So it's great that I have this chance to do this. I also apologize for the time, but yeah, we're sort of trying to do this one session in the morning for some, one session in the evening for others. So yeah, I do have access to the chat, so then feel free to ask questions there, or feel free to interrupt me. I'm perfectly fine with people asking questions and sort of interrupting and saying that they don't understand or that they'd like to give some inputs to what I'm saying. I think you can see my presentation. Yeah, okay. So the first thing is, whenever I start talking about games and transfer, the people say that it is irresponsible to think about games for such a serious topic, because nothing is more serious than transport policy. Because of course, as we perfectly know, lives are at stake. There's a lot of great expenditures that must be analyzed thoroughly. We shouldn't be sort of playing around. And of course, efficiency, and games don't really sound like something that is super efficient. I hope that I can change your mind a little bit around that. So I want to begin with sort of the more theoretical side. There's a few books towards the end of the presentation. I'll show you sort of the typical books that one should read to sort of learn about games and maybe transport. The first person that did this was this Huizinga guy in, I guess, in the Netherlands. So then he said, like, okay, what are the characteristics? A game is an activity which proceeds within certain limits of time and space. It has a visible order. It's according to rules that are freely accepted. It's outside the sphere of necessity, so nobody really needs to do it. They just want to. there's a play mood, and then there's this feeling of exaltation and tension. If you look at this, every game follows that. There's some more modern definitions. And then there was this other guy who just said, well, you know what? A game is a voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. And he just wrote a full book just saying whether that was true or not. And in the end, it was true. And the game is really weird because the book is really weird because it's a grasshopper talking to other animals. And he's sort of, the grasshopper is a huge philosopher. So it's very fun to read. So let's keep that in mind as I move forward. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just describe some things that have some characteristics of games and tell you how they worked and how either I was involved or somebody else was doing something in developing them. And sort of from then on, we can sort of open up for more questions and looking at this. Okay, so some very simple ones. This one is, we just did a Google Drive in an activity, in an event, because it was in the middle of the pandemic. And I just said, well, I don't want to do a presentation. I just want for people to play. And I basically put some drawings in a slide, shared the slide through Google Slides and told them, okay, just try to draw your own inverted pyramid of mobility. And that was a 10-minute thing, but then it really got people to learn about what is the priority of one thing above the next. So yeah, just to say, you can do very simple things to do games in transportation. But then other stuff that I was able to do when I was more permanently in Numo, and we sort of said, well, why don't we use Lego to present an idea of transportation, get people to think about transportation? It sort of sounds like a very simple thing. It is very expensive. Lego is extremely expensive. You can buy used Lego from many people, but anyway, it's not very easy. And of course, in the middle of the pandemic or virtually, it's very difficult to get people to play with Lego. You have to get them to play. But while or before, or even during the pandemic, it wasn't sort of so difficult to use Lego to present some very specific messages. Like the picture you see here was my attempt at describing the space that each mode of transport occupies. So it's walking, person on a bicycle, person in a car, person in a scooter. And that was really simple. And like I got a bunch of retweets and likes out of this picture. So that was sort of the kind of thing that you can do with Lego. As long as you have the right proportions, you should be fine. And it helps a lot in workshops to use that kind of thing. So in the end, it's sort of generating awareness, communicating solutions, and producing different scenarios. If you are going to use Lego, please remember to use the registered trademark. Lego has a full document describing how you can use the Lego name. But it's, in summary, put the trademark after every time you say Lego and put it in all caps. It's sort of the rule. But if you can have a chance to use it, it really helps in having people sort of literally play around this. But then there's other stuff that has been done with Lego. Like I wasn't the first time. Like there's this plastic planners. There's a bunch of people doing some form of illustration of Lego. So it's not like I came up with the idea. And then something much more interesting is that there's even people, you can do Lego ideas. And this is one guy in the Netherlands who is pushing for this idea of having Lego bike lanes, which weirdly, Lego being from Denmark, there's no specific Lego sort of set of bikeways, or the Lego city doesn't have bikeways. So it seems that it's getting some traction. And I'm happy to show you, to send you some of these links afterwards, because now I just noticed I can't send you the links now. I can just do it here. Okay, so that's about Lego. Another one that I wanted to describe was this game that we came up with. Well, Robin Chase, who is the founder of Zipcar, came up with this idea of doing a card game. So what we did was that we said, well, let's play with people in a way that they can sort of challenge others to think differently. I actually wanted to play the game today, but sort of the time wasn't enough to really do a session around the game, but it's pretty nice. And I think Sonia, oh, I think Miguel Angel, I didn't give you a deck, but every time I travel somewhere, I still have a few decks, so then I give them around. It's in Spanish, it's in English for now. If anybody wants to translate, I can send you the instructions to translate. If anybody would like to do a session of the game, I'm very happy to schedule one because we have a virtual version. So that's pretty nice. And in the end, the idea behind this card game is for people to at least think about potential things that you can do differently. So that's sort of one of the ways that we've used it. Well, of course, people are happy when they play it, I guess is the summary of the slide. A bunch of people have played it. That is the first version that we did once, and the second version is now available. Okay, another one that I think is really interesting is, but I haven't been able to do it. You need a lot of money to do it, but it would be nice to do. You have a group of people, for example, a company, and you tell the company, okay, let's give people $300 at the beginning of the month. Depending on what mode of transport they use, at the end of the month, they either keep the $300 or they keep very little money. So the nice thing about this is that it follows sort of, well, not game theory, but behavioral economics. People are much more motivated where they lose things because they do things and they win things because they do things right, rather than you promising something for the end and they start with nothing. So that's why the assumption here is people have a bunch of money at the beginning. They just have to do something to keep it, right? Of course, if you have $300 and it's 100 people, then you need $30,000. That is sort of the obstacle. But you can do this with points. A lot of companies do this with points. They have mobility plans, and it's pretty nice when it works, because then you actually didn't do much and got people to move differently. You can do many more things around this, like take people on a cycling route in the morning, so you pick everybody up. It's a little bit complicated to schedule, but when you combine it with this incentive, which is actually just the incentive is there in front of you. You just have to keep it. You just have to do things properly. Then it can work. So if anybody has $30,000 or more, let's do this project, because it could be pretty nice to see what happens. And of course, at the end, you can measure how many, what are the benefits that were done. I had mentioned this to somebody a few weeks back. I don't remember who, but we were talking about how public space use can be sort of better monitored, better motivated. The public space development should be better motivated. And then finally, I found these drawings that I learned actually from Daniel Sauter, who is a researcher in Switzerland. So I actually, at Sunny, it would be great if we find him and then sort of have him present at some point, because like there's a lot of research around use of public space, and this was really nice. So what he did was, well, it was Marco Hüttenmoser who did this, but he worked with Daniel Sauter. And what he did was, okay, let's get children to draw. And when they were drawing their route to school, and the pictures on the left are the drawings from children who are walking to school. You see a lot of detail, and yeah, a lot of children can draw much better than us. And they have a lot more time than us when somebody says draw. So the children on the left were drawing the route to school when they were walking. The drawings on the right are from children who were driven in a car to school. So maybe it's a little bit of cherry picking the drawings. I actually did the same exercise with adults, and I don't have that here. But if I'm good at multitasking, I'm going to try and show you sort of what came out of that. But in the end, the idea here is how can you do something where you get people to play around with you and do something which is nice, right? Like, so this is one of the things. It's a very simple thing. The only thing that you need is white paper and color, and then from then on you can start sort of seeing what can happen, what can be done, what do you get from that, and actually um, what can come from this. So yeah, I owe you the route from the drawings from the people in the Guggenheim. So this is another one that I really like a lot. I go to Streetmix. It's sort of, I'm going to type in the streetmix.net. If you go to that website, you will see that you can basically draw and redesign a street in. Oh, Miguel Angel, yeah, just interrupt because I can't see your hand. So please interrupt.
Sorry. I just want to remark that in Culiacan, with the support of you guys with GRSP exactly in this children's drawing, we provide children's cameras. So what they did is to photograph all the way from their homes to the school, and then they make a draw of a where to improve all the road safety in Culiacan. So it was very funny. It was a very educative. It was very interesting. The results are very interesting because I guess if we provide information from down to the up to the decisions makers, we can start some small changes in the future. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and thanks, and that's great. So in the end, this is about engaging and sort of people getting people to have a mission. So sometimes I have this example where I tell people it's like when you have to wash the dishes. If you say you have to wash the dishes, like you're not really motivated. If you tell somebody, well, a child, let's see who can wash the dishes cleaner and faster, then they'll just start washing the dishes. So sort of the framing is very important in the way that we get people to do things. And in transport, there's a bunch of things that you can do. Like you are basically asking people about your city, and that's great. And thanks for these examples. Of course, Tonucci that Sonia is mentioning is a great reference. Lynch was the first person to sort of propose the idea of a cognitive map, and I'm very happy to learn that Save the Children was doing something similar in Vietnam. Okay, so great. So I was talking about Streetmix. It is sort of a very simple website. It's very straightforward, very easy to use, to basically produce a new version of a street. You don't need an architect or a designer or somebody with very fancy software. It's just a website that shows you how to produce a new street. So I really invite you to go there. We were trying to do this where we're going to record a video and project it onto the top of a street. Permits from government were extremely difficult, so that wasn't possible. But in the end, like you can present these things to people and tell them like this is another scenario. Like you can think about this. It's not difficult to think about this. So yeah, so I'll just skip this. Streetmix has worked for a while now, and it exists for several years now. But basically, what it does is it has all these elements of a street. You can play with the street and then just design whatever you want. What we did in Bogotá in 2020 during the pandemic was we got some people to design their streets. We got one avenue, which is called the Séptima. And what we did was we had people propose different versions of Séptima, which is one avenue. That is because it is coding, then that was translated into a spreadsheet, and then we could analyze the results. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth here because I think it's a very nice example. It was under 2 weeks. We got almost 7,000 proposals, out of which a little bit more than 6,000 were valid. So they were really actually well thought out proposals, which I think was incredible. Like getting 7,000 people to really go to your website and sort of following it was crazy. I was expecting 100, and then we got 7,000. So it's sort of one of my most huge successes in life, I guess, getting 7 people to answer. But so what we found here, like there's a very long presentation where I present all the findings, but I guess I want to show we got a lot of people to sort of think like they were playing around, but they did sort of examples of streets weren't necessarily crazy, right? Like this one has 2 people in magic carpets and somebody in an autonomous vehicle. None of that exists in Bogotá that I know of. Like there's no AVs and there's no magic carpets, but people were sort of willing to propose this kind of thing. So what we said is, okay, it's fine. People can propose. It's going to be okay if we give people like the freedom to propose things that are crazy, because then you sort of spark a new way of understanding streets. What we found in that exercise was that you can see how the distribution of the street is reduced in terms of the individual motorist transport gets less space, whereas public transport, bicycles and scooters get more space. So we had an increase in space for bicycles and skateboards, an increase in 74% in the space for public transit. And this was very clear, like it was very explicit to see how people were just proposing whatever they wanted, but they kept the same essence, which was improving the street for people walking, cycling, and using transit, basically. So that was really nice, and I think that was a good thing to note and to see sort of where it came. We could also sort of there look at the emissions, the CO2 emissions, because the platform was with CO2 emissions, and we could also see the capacities of the streets and how they were improved. So we reduced emissions, or we had proposals which would reduce emissions, and we had proposals which would increase capacity of the streets that were proposed. So citizens are geniuses of climate change and capacity of design. We don't need engineers. No, we do need engineers when we get sort of the essence there. Because we could go into the data and say, can we see how safer the street is, for example? We didn't do that because it's not so easy to sort of estimate that, but we could say streets that have had these changes would make it safer for people to use. So that's sort of one thing that I wanted to show. Another exercise, sorry, I have too many of these, but I guess it's good to sort of see how you can apply these principles. So we got these people to, this is a regular e-bike, this is an electric e-bike, sorry, this is a regular cargo bike, electric cargo bike, and the truck. And then we told these people, okay, just go 1.3 kilometers from this parking space to this fair to take 20, like this was like 8 boxes which contained 20 sort of gifts. It was pretty heavy, something like 80 kilogram. And what we did there was, well, let's do a race. And what we found was that the cargo bike, the electric cargo bike won. The second one was the cargo bike, and the third was the truck. The electric cargo bike, it took them 7 minutes, the cargo bike 9 minutes, and the truck was 13 minutes to do that 1.3 kilometer ride. And it was like, this is generally called the commuter challenge. You can see many different versions of it. The commuter challenge is pretty nice because you get people to sort of basically bet on who is going to win, and they normally assume that the motorized vehicle will win. There was one version in Sao Paulo where the people thought the helicopter would win, and the person in the helicopter got there last. Because of course, to get in a helicopter, you have to go up in the elevator to the heliport, then take the helicopter, then go down, and then maybe take a car. So it's really interesting to do this in that way, because if you show the graph, then people are like, yeah, okay, I believe your graph, or I don't believe your graph. But if you do it as a race, then people get interested, right? Like you get the media to say, okay, who's going to win? That kind of thing is pretty interesting to see. We also estimated the kilometers. We also estimated how many. Well, this was sort of the travel time and the measured travel time. So that was nice. I think this is my last example. I wanted to show that UN Habitat had arrived at an agreement with Minecraft, which is a video game. And they basically, what they did, and this is a manual that I can share the link to, but basically what they did is that they taught children in several African cities to use Minecraft and to play with Minecraft. Then they produced a version of a plaza or a park as it is today, and then they asked the children to redesign it with the tools of Minecraft. The assumption here is that they would later, like, Minecraft is detailed enough so that you can sort of see more or less how people would like to do this, and you can do this to produce children's ideas of how they would do a park. So basically, the Streetmix example that I showed was basically looking at this Minecraft one. How can we do this for streets? But I think it could be one way of doing this with children in streets, in crossings that we have. There's a few more tools that I wanted to share. I think time is not on my side because I prefer to have people sort of give me comments, and in the meantime I can copy and paste some of the ideas that we did. So then the question that I have is, how do we engage children and youth with games? How could we start using these principles that I said at the beginning so that we can use them in their projects? Like, how can we engage youth so that they really participate very actively in playing games so that road safety improves? Yeah, like we have this traditional way of thinking about participation, which is, let's get people to a meeting, give them a presentation. But of course, in the case of you as our grantees, I know that you're already doing very nice things. So the question is, how do we use this as an inspiration for activities that we can do? And also, I think, how can we use the community of practice to sort of apply these things and sort of look at this? How can we get more views? And I was going to close by giving you, like, this is my small library of print books of around games. So that I was mentioning Homo Ludens, which was the first one, then Man, Play, and Games is another one, which of course, because of the title, you will know that it's not very recent. Nobody would call a book Man and assume that this is everybody. The Grasshopper is this other one, which is very philosophical. And then these two new ones are Reality is Broken, is this person who did her PhD around gaming, like virtual games and improving society. And this last one, We the Gamers, I just got it a week ago, so I can't describe what it says, but it's basically going through the same line. But there is a lot, like there is even one initiative called Games for Change. They are essentially applying everything that I said to improving society, to finding good ways of reducing the negative impacts in sectors. So I think we have like a new space where we can start to work more. I'm very motivated by this. I'm like, this is one of the topics that I'm working on the most. So yeah, so I'm happy to hear from people and their views, and like happy to also go through any of the slides that you think are important. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can share openly. So feel free to open your mic and say something, ask questions. We still have a little bit less than half an hour, but I'm going to start looking. Sonia, please go ahead and feel free to just open the mic. I think we're going to be fine.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Well, I think all the good practices you show are very useful regarding how can we commit in a more in a better way youth or students. I believe that something very interesting that has risen up during the Botnar challenge is that it depends of the range of ages that we have. For example, now that we are carrying out an ethnographic study, we don't have by now the results. We are carrying it out, but we have identified that through digital means there are different perspectives of playing. So children from one age, maybe from basic school, will try to play, but maybe youth that are more like in university won't be like wishing to play something very specifically. So I believe that we have to make this differentiation between students also and youth. And well, regarding the drawing, I developed this exercise like 10 years ago in Mexico City, and it was really it was um, um, raising up a critique about that project because I was studying engineer. So they say, how will this improve mobility? Like they were very related to surveys, origin, destination, and things like that. So, I mean, we need tools to make visible what youth what youth need and desire, because it's more than only redesigning space, but going beyond that is a need of many people to change the reality we all live. Yeah. And I think that, for example, Lego has many initiatives, but I think that one challenge, for example, for us will be like to having budget to address those types of tools for some of our projects, because in the end we have budgeted some elements for our project, but I mean we are lack of some tools. And I think maybe we can develop like an alliance with Lego, like to establish how to make inputs from this type of exercise to their idea or co-creation process. But it will be very useful. I can exchange some of books I have on some papers. I think it will be very useful to have this online so everyone in the group can consult it.
I love that. Thank you for all that. And please, let's find ways of moving with this forward. Like Lego has a foundation and they do fun things. I've never gone into it so in depth, but I think it could be one way. And then to the point that you were saying, I'll just keep talking, but please feel free to interrupt anybody. But to the point about the difference between children and youth, and it's true, like young people won't start sort of skipping and jumping on these colored circles. They'll never do that. But and that's where I feel that virtual games could be a way. Like video games are seen as something generally negative, and the good thing about sort of when you start reading about this is, yes, they can become negative unless you use them properly. Like there's a thing, never let a child or a young person or anybody play more than 20 hours a day video games. Like that is above 20 hours, it's horrible. And of course, look at the games that you're doing. So I was mentioning Games for Change, and I'm going to paste the link here because I really find them very interesting. And what they're doing now is also doing a lot of AR and VR, which I think could become something really interesting. And we could even start thinking about how to do AR and VR to develop other ways of looking at opportunities, right? So the main thing around 3D Streetmix is that you can get, and I'm going to share this quickly also. When you have Streetmix, then of course you can see here that you can play around with the street and then just do everything that you want. It's pretty easy. And if you sign up, oh yeah, not here, but if you sign up, you can come up with different ways of having more functions in the street. So this is pretty nice to use as a way of moving forward. And there's another one that's just started that's called 3D Street, but their website is off. So I'll try to fix, I'll try to show it you later. But in the end, like there's enough inspiration, right? And yeah, Miguel Ángel, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Carlos. And with these applications, can you go or play with down the streets? I mean, normally, at least in Mexico, and I guess in all the Latin American countries, normally we can design a street like this, but we normally forget what happens down the street. I mean, the drenaje, I don't know how to say drainage.
Yeah, below. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly below the street, the drenaje, cables, telephone cables, light cables. I'm sorry. So normally, when we design on the street, we forgot what is happening below the street, and then with the years, decisions makers, of course, they destroy everything that we made. No, so you can design everything very beautiful as the image that you are showing us, but at the end of the time, at least in Latin American countries, if we don't design below the street as well, there will be a problem through the years.
So I wanted, yeah, so the good thing about Streetmix is that you can actually come up with those, like you can code directly into Streetmix, right? Like this is an open source development. So you can go here and come up, this explains to you everything, how you can install your own version of Streetmix. The important thing is how to get people to contribute. And when I was talking to them, like one of the things that people want to have is to be able to also design what is underneath. So drainage, but also like subways and elevated metros and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't super happy to do that just because the platform becomes too complicated. But the principle can be followed, and you could, like, it doesn't take a lot of money. You can get a programmer to go here to the GitHub page of Streetmix and basically produce the new component beneath the street. You can do that, and you can tell Streetmix, like, okay, here it is. You can do it. You can pull it into your platform or not. But that's pretty nice, because then, like, the good thing about open source development is that you get people to contribute. So there's 56 people contributing here. None of them get paid generally, but you can pay somebody to help in producing this. Like in my previous work, I added the autonomous vehicle, the capacities, and the improvement. Oh, the magic carpet was my idea, and then I got a programmer and a designer to add them to the platform. So you can do that. I mean, the magic carpet, you need to sign in, but if I sign in here, then my computer crashes and this. But you can go to Streetmix and then sign in and play around. And then later they got the BRT to be included into this, and that was pretty nice.
Awesome. Yes.
So you can get, if you get somebody, then they can do that. And then I was showing you that this is the 3D version of Streetmix. You can actually paste this address here, and it should produce. This is still under development, but it should produce. So you see, this street is exactly this.
Exactly.
So you could, like what you're saying, could work here. Like you could go below, and instead of looking at it from below, you could go really beneath and go here. So, and again, this one is also under development in GitHub, and so I'm part of this group, but I have no idea how to code, but I'm good at sort of giving them advice, and like this is pretty nice. And as you can see, this is incredible. Like I'm always amazed that these guys are giving this out for free, and we can use this a lot. So Yeah.
Hi, Carlos. Yes, Kim
Yeah.
here. Just
Yeah.
want to add that I think it's also important that in this we use it for conceptual and how they look like. But when we have to remember is when we do the construction drawing, we really need to actually also conduct utility surveys, underground utility survey, as also drainage survey, to make sure that the design will not have any conflict with underground utilities or with the drainage or everything. And then based on that, we can also adjust the design based on it, and then, and then show the city official what the design will look like.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so, and I think that points to something which is crucial, and it's so when we're doing this, we are doing several things, but we are not producing the final design, right? We're getting people's views as to how they would like to see things happening. That's the essential component of what we're doing, and we do need all the rest. Like I was having a discussion a few weeks back with somebody in Lima, and then they were saying that they didn't like for people to do cognitive maps because that was diverting the attention and wasn't really precise. And then at the end, after a long discussion, we agreed that these things are tools to get people's views. They are not results to act upon, but rather, so when we did the Séptima thing, the one that I was showing in Streetmix, we had 6,000 people giving their views. First, we weren't going to select any of the designs. We were getting a general sense of how people felt about how they could redesign the street. And it is something crucial to really note. Like there's different goals in the activities. And of course, if we do this, we have to do it cognizant of that. That we're not going to say, well, this is a perfect design, that's when it's done. We really need to do all the engineering work to get it done. Unfortunately, as Miguel Angel was saying also, sometimes we don't even know what's beneath. No, we find relics and old cities and all that, and even huge aqueduct that nobody really knew that was there, and we have to redesign everything just because it was found. But Sonia, yeah, go ahead.
I have two questions. The first one is we have developed some criteria, guidelines and criteria with some governments about redesigning urban equipments. In those, we included schools. So the question is, can we develop like a merge of 3D Street Viewer and Minecraft? Because one is for like having a view of a section of a street, and the other one is a complete area or space that can be redesigned. So I'm trying to I completely agree, Carlos, that these are used as tools to support some of the decisions, but are not the final redesigns or blueprints that are going to be implemented in many ways. But are there any tool, or is there any tool that can merge both of these outputs for making a view of an area particularly?
So not yet. Like okay, so yeah, so that's a lot of things. So when I discuss with the 3D street people, they're actually trying to come up with what is the actual use that's going to happen, and what they're doing is, well, this version doesn't have the buttons, but there's new buttons which will show you can download the AutoCAD drawing and the 3D file so that they can continue with a more detailed 3D file. There's nothing yet that redesigns like the area. So one of the things that we've always wanted to have is not just the section, right? Which is like the first thing that people say when they see Streetmix is, this is a section, I need the plan view. and so the people in 3D Street are starting to solve that, but for now, they're starting from the section view and reproducing that into a 3D version. What will come later is how can we basically, if you see here, you can't move this from like I can't move and see where's the crossing. And in road safety specifically and especially, we need to be able to draw the crossing, because of course we all know that the crossing is a place where everything is happening, and that's where you get a higher risk. And so everybody wants to have the crossing. Like there's people who are doing that. It's not so much games. Like Remix does that. You have to pay them. So Remix is one of the new versions. Like they are a spin-off, let's say, of Streetmix. They charge for everything, but you can use them to sort of, you can see like they're, I'm going to mute this, but you can see that they have like this is the next step, right? You have the early ideas, and then you go to the street, you come up with a street that you want to redesign, and then you come up with exactly what it is that you want to redesign specifically, right? So the tools exist; they're not free. I'm generally like, because I like open source software, so I always use Streetmix. 3D Street is going to be quasi free. Remix is not free, but I think there's a lot of things that can happen, and I hope that we can start developing things that really work as a better tool for people and a cheaper tool for people, right? That's the kind of thing that I would like to see in our work, so that we, yeah, Tani, go ahead.
Thanks for that, Carlos. Really interesting stuff going on. And can I just ground this a little bit in terms of, me as an amateur program manager who's new to this space. If we
Yeah.
were supposed to conceptualize something for a program, where do you see practically with the utility of things like this? Do you think what I'm hearing from you is that this is an engagement tool, and also to sort of like to sort of gauge where stakeholders are at, right, in terms of
Right.
designing, say, for spaces and urban streets, for example. So, do you think it would be good for us, for example, in the extension of phase 2, or in a new conceptualized program with Botnar, for example, that this could be an activity that you can conduct, well, or like grantees and NGOs such as our invitees on this presentation can sort of gauge with different stakeholders and to do this exercise? Is that what you plan? Was that what your sort of like tack would be?
So what I think, that's, thank you for, we can use the remaining minutes sort of coming up with that. I think that uh, we, so I wanted to sort of open up the idea of how, if and how we can use games for some of our goals. I think the next steps are several. So one is, of course, to start seeing what games already exist, and what initiatives are already addressing transportation questions and road safety specifically,
Right.
which I don't know any yet, through sort of a lens of doing games. And once we know that, then we can start saying, okay, which are the questions that are the most difficult, because people basically are not paying attention, right? Like that is sort of my obsession. I've been as you kindly noted in my CV, like I've been doing 100, like more than 100 training courses, right? And in every one, I'm sort of, whenever I see people who are falling asleep, I'm like, I'm doing something wrong. And that's how sort of I've started to shift to doing more on hands-on activities
Mm.
that we can hopefully have include things like um, having games as part of this. I, I really, when we did the MoMobility card game, that was a very good one to open up people to other views, and that is sort of it definitely works at the beginning of any activity, of any workshop. That's like a perfect way of beginning a workshop. So I know that that is for that. That has that goal. But then how can we, for example, get youth to give their ideas more actively for a design so that it matches their own interests in experiencing the city, right? Not just generating safer roads, but also having them live their city better. How can we connect places better through the way, like through games? And I think if we sort of start doing that exercise of identifying these things where games could help, then we can say, okay, let's actually develop one game that can do this. Like, it's incredibly cheap, like comparatively to other things. Developing a game, like consultants who do games they're actually very kind people who give you their time for nothing sometimes. And like the card game, we got this guy to sort of review the whole thing in 2 hours, give us some sort of ideas from the beta version, and then we developed the final one. So if we find something where a game could help, and we develop a game for road safety or engagement in road safety or some other thing that we haven't been able to really get people's attention, like that could be a goal of the program. And if some grantees say that would be perfect if I can do it for this thing, that could be one way of going. So that's sort of my how I think it could work. But of course, we should start by seeing what is out there and then coming from there. Oh yeah, and Sonia was also.
No, I think it's a great idea, Carlos, and I think you're right. You insinuated sort of like games in terms of utilizing tech such as this open source, and then there's also AR and virtual reality, which will be very interesting. But I also think that there's some beauty in the simplicity of simple things like board games, right? I mean, I went to one session where us as adults went to sort of road safety auditing course, and I don't know if you know Phil Jordan. He's based more in Australia, but he's done quite a lot of work around road safety auditing. But he sort of took um, engineers from young ones to sort of like senior ones to go through the safety audit process. But we use games in terms of where would you put this crosswalk, this pathways, this remediations, these intersections and so forth. And that actually is a great utility for them to be able to see the whole street and sort of have a dialogue. And you're right, it is. And his feedback, and he's been doing this for years, is that it's always much better than sort of a lecture, right? Where people sort of, they listen, they get tired, and they go to sleep, like you say. But when you're actually doing things and you're learning by doing and sort of having a discussion and a collaboration, that's certainly more appealing, and I think the retention is much more elevated that way.
Yeah. And then and then Sonia, I mean, the thing about licenses is obviously always a huge thing, and that's why I always say let's do open source. And yeah, okay, you were exactly writing that, because otherwise then it's sort of a headache. And the nice thing is that there's enough people working on open source tools, some of them doing them for transportation, and like we can find tools that are useful as games or useful as, I mean, I think that is sort of another session. How can we start developing things which are sort of more digital and more open source for the benefit of road safety? Like, how can we help people in having a tool where they paste their data on road safety deaths and injuries, and it shows you sort of key trends, key indicators, and like that could be done, and it's not a huge deal, and it could help a lot. But I think that's that's another session. I think it relates a lot to games, but sort of I propose we do another one on open source, and we get somebody who's an expert on open source to sort of tell us beautiful opportunities where we don't have to spend money on licenses, but rather on development that can be used by everybody. Okay, we have 1 more minute. So we're done. Happy to conclude
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, if there's no other questions, that was a great inspirational sort of war cry from you and me as well. I think that's something that that I would take into mind as well for a lot of our training and engagement here, not just in the Botnar program, but GRSP. And I'll speak to you offline. I am deeply interested in that Streetmix. But yeah, thank you for that session, Carlos. If anyone else has anything else to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. If not, then we can conclude.
Congratulations and thank you.
Yep. Thanks. This was
Thanks,
great.
Carlos.
Okay.
Thanks,
bye.
guys.
Thank you, Carlos. See you
See you
all.
soon.
Bye.
Ciao.